So the other day I was thinking to myself, you know, I haven't talked to Colonel O'Donnell in a while. The truth of the matter is, he's here for the first time.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
That's right, the Superintendent of our Rhode Island State Police. I always say the last bastion of integrity that we have in this state, or the last bus on that level. Steve O'Donnell is here. Are they a flawless organization? Of course not. But they certainly are accredited and reputed at the highest level of law enforcement. And for that, we can be thankful. I've got questions about all sorts of things, but they've got some new data about highway fatalities, them being down. We'll talk about the roads. We'll talk about the mission. We'll talk about 38 studios. We'll talk about truck tolls. And the Colonel will probably do his best to be very reserved in answers to the latter two. But you know how it goes. It's great to have you into my state of mind. Thank you very much for tuning in. Let's just swing over the rundown for just a couple of notes. Did you watch this today? Only adding to the circus. Crazy stuff. Can I remind you of what happened 4 years ago when Donald Trump and Mitt Romney got together?
It's my honor, real honor, and privilege to endorse Mitt Romney. I've gotten...
My, what 4 years will do, right? Now, we'll talk a little bit about the currency of and the equity between an endorsement 4 years ago and what happened today in a second. But it's a very different picture. Headlines from the midday, phony and a fraud. Yep, tweets out the wazoo from Mitt Romney. He's kind of, old-fashioned. So when Mitt Romney is tweeting, it kind of cracks me up a little bit. But let me throw a couple of bits from his speech today. Here's cut one, as we say in the business.
Donald Trump is a phony, a fraud. His promises are as worthless as a degree from Trump University.
And then this.
If we Republicans choose Donald Trump as our nominee, the prospects for a safe and prosperous future are greatly diminished.
And then there was that.
Frankly, the only serious policy proposals that deal with the broad range of national challenges we confront today come from Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, and John Kasich. One of these men should be our nominee.
It got a lot worse. That's what we got from the network. I watched it live, and it was a lot worse. He talked about Trump back in the days of Vietnam, running around, being sexually exploitive, while John McCain was a prisoner of war, talking about his criticisms of John McCain, meaning Trump's. It was a really tough speech. Its relevance, I'm not so sure. Of course, Trump responded. He was in Portland, Maine for a little bit before he went to the Fox debate tonight.
He ran one of the worst campaigns, as you know, in presidential history. That was an election that should have been won by the Republicans. He was a catastrophe.
I should say that was actually audio from the Today Show. Because of our production schedule for the show, we didn't catch the comments in Portland, Maine. But amongst the things that Donald Trump said were the notion that Mitt Romney begged me for so much money, and he wanted my endorsement so badly. It was more about the endorsement. He begged me for the endorsement so much that if I told him to get down on his knees, he would have. So he called him disloyal and all this kind of thing. Now, if you're seeing the 7:30 show, you haven't seen the debate yet. If you were watching the midnight show, you probably saw the debate. So I can't comment on how the debate's going to go, but I'm sure there's going to be a lot of this Romney insertion into the debate, and it's going to be nutty. For those of you who say, "Oh, Mitt Romney, what's he talking about?" Listen, the rules have all been broken. Donald Trump broke the rules with his candidacy in the way he's going about it. Okay, it's America. Mitt Romney was the former nominee. He's an establishment leader. He has every right to say what he has to say. Frankly, he did a dance on Trump's head that would have been effective 2 months ago. I'm not so sure that the train can be slowed down on the track right now. I think the real signal from Romney was, those of you with the big money, you need to start sending it to those PACs that are going to crawl all over Donald Trump. We'll see how that all works out for him. There are so many things on a local level that I wanted to get to today, but when I have a substantial guest like we have tonight, there's no time of wasting. It's an honor to have the Colonel. Here's the latest headline on the fatalities and and the like when it comes to a difficult subject matter. I mean, we've talked at length in the past, Colonel O'Donnell, about how difficult it is to have to drive up upon a scene on a highway. Accidents, death resulting. It's not easy. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Good to have you. The numbers are better?
Well, the numbers were good up to January 1, 2016. Unfortunately, when you pronounce or announce that the death rate's going down in the last 3 years, which it has substantially, the last 2 months we've had 10 people die in Rhode Island, which is a huge percentage gap of higher than what it should be from last year.
Why?
Well, it's across the board. It's not something you could say it's drunk driving. It's a combination of the fatals that we know from certainly alcohol and impaired operation, a percentage of them, distracted driving. One was simply an accident that just happened that way, but different behavior in driving. So it's everything. And in the past, we've looked at, say, drunk driving or wrong-way driving deaths, and we put attention to that, put mitigation systems up, and we've impacted that. But we still haven't been able to get the total message out to everybody about proper etiquette when you're driving, from speed to distracted. I think distracted driving is a massive problem here. Some of the fatals, we can't exactly prove how they happened through texting and driving or not paying attention, but we had a recent fatal accident that hopefully won't become a double fatal in Exeter, where alcohol and young people involved. You had a fatal in Portsmouth the other day, a pedestrian. So there's a whole gamut that is causing these accidents. The good news with that is Department of Transportation has ponied up money, and we have several troopers assigned just for traffic safety. What that means is they call it the Alliance. They're working with local police departments, mapping all the accidents across the state, pushing it back to local police departments, pushing it back to the state police. Where are we finding trends? If we find a trend, we put people to that trend. Part of it's education, getting the message out again to the public about paying attention when you're driving, pay attention to the laws, be courteous, stay away from the distracted piece with the cell phones, the alcohol, impaired, marijuana, and other drugs that people may use when they're going to operate vehicles. So it's a gamut of issues that have caused the recent rash of fatals.
You know, it shouldn't be a jungle out there, but sometimes it feels like it is. Yeah, sort of.
No, I agree. I think when you talk to the people that enforce those laws, it's also incumbent upon me to tell you how dangerous it is for them. The troopers and the local police that are enforcing traffic laws, sometimes at their own risk, their own peril. They're at high speeds vehicles next to them. We have a move over law, which makes you move over when there's an emergency vehicle or a police car. Sometimes people don't pay attention to that. It's to protect the safety people on the side of the road. The other night, I witnessed an accident, and it was a young man that we're alleging was intoxicated, and he just went off the road and hit a tree, and for the grace of God, he's still alive. But I think part of that is because you have good medical people. We had a ER doctor on scene that made sure that they could take care of someone as best they can. So I just think do care to drive. When you're driving, if you're going to be late, go early. All the things, everyone's busy, everyone has his phones and technology, but I think we really did take it back. We had 45 people die on the highways last year, the year before 51. Now someone may say, wow, that's not a lot of numbers, but that's more than people were killed in homicides last year on Rhode Island. And 1/3 of them are alcohol or drug related. So there are 40 people or 45 people that impacts their family. That's multiple people that are impacted by that. So we'd like to get to zero. Is it realistic?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned this. The other day I was on the side of the road, and the traffic, it was actually coming out of the radio station on the Wampanoag Trail, and for some reason the traffic was just very heavy. So I had to wait probably a good 2 minutes before there was a break in the action. But it gave me enough pause to actually watch the vehicles themselves and the speed of the vehicle, and nobody was really speeding. You forget how quickly you're moving, and the security of the modern car today, you forget how quickly you are moving until impact, and then you don't forget at all how quickly you're moving. We get too comfortable, I think, in the car sometimes with the other things that we're doing, and I guess that's what you're talking about.
That's exactly what I'm alluding to, and seatbelts. You know, we've improved seatbelt. I give the legislature.
They're still not using it.
Yeah, it's the fatal we had in Exeter the other day. All 4 people in the car were ejected. 1 died, and 1 is in really rough shape, no seatbelt. So the younger people are using the seatbelts more, believe it or not, but it's still a problem. It's getting better with legislation, but it's still an issue. So there's always one or two people that fall into that category that are just not wearing them for whatever reason. I'm not sure. For my children, it's part of their culture. They grew up with it since they were little kids. We find that the middle-aged people use them less than the younger people because it's just part of what they do.
All right, when we come back, there's a whole bunch more to cover with the Colonel. Stay with us. All right, so sometimes the state police gets caught in the crosshairs of political debate. The truck toll law has been, well, it's been fully signed into law. When we actually have gantries up is anybody's guess. There's a space of time between 18 months and 3 years that the legislation allows for vendors to actually start putting up the gantries and the like. The state police were invoked by the Department of Transportation during the middle of this debate, suggesting that trucks that tried to beat the tolls would be handled by the state police. And I think I'm paraphrasing in an oversimplified way. I was kind of horrified that the DOT more or less brought the state police into the argument and opined that way. What is your official position on what your role is going to be if we ever do have these gantries up, and what enforcement's going to look like?
Well, right now it's hard to say because it's not there. There's no exact plan if we saw a plan. But I think in theory that's what it is. If you remember when the Pawtucket River Bridge happened, that we enforced the weight restrictions on the bridge and axle restrictions to make sure that the trucks weren't using that. If they did, they paid a penalty for doing that, impacting the bridge.
Well, I didn't want to bring that up, but since you did, I am horrified, my opine, I am horrified that the governor, the DOT director, and the Speaker of the House suggested during that truck toll debate that truckers purposely took the risk or took the hit to go over the Pawtucket River Bridge for time expediency. One of their rationale to argue that they'll take the tolls with a grain of salt. I don't need you to get involved in the political conversation, but I'm guessing you'll agree with me that it wasn't a laissez-faire, nonchalant exercise for these truckers to get tagged over the Pawtucket River Bridge. They didn't take it as a part of their expediency plan. $1,000 hit when the profit on a truckload is about $150. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what the dialogue with the trucks and the political piece of that. I just know when the trucks were going over the bridge, we had a problem enforcing it because if every truck that comes over goes over the bridge, it's overweight, and you can't charge someone being overweight unless you weigh them. And obviously, if you have one person weighing them, you can't get every truck. So there was a statute that was changed for axles, multiple axles going over. Right. So it would be obedience to signs that we charged them with that, and the fine was not as substantial as an overweight. And we did the overweight too. So I think for the gantries, somewhere someone's going to have to come up with a plan how they're going to do that. So I'm not uncomfortable with someone saying that the state police enforce it, because they asked me, look, if there was a law and it's out there and we know it, we'll enforce any law.
But will they consult you on the kind of law that should be written around it? In other words, are we going to reclassify every road that's proximate to a gantry so that we prohibit commercial truck traffic? Is that what we're going to do?
I'm not sure what we would do, but I know that when this happens, there'll be conversations. I'm sure we'll be privy to those conversations about what trucks can go where and what roads they can use.
And what will you tell them about? Listen, one of the things that you talk about continually, and I think appropriately, is the number of resources that you have to do all these things. I mean, how many resources do we have to be having troopers out there hunting down trucks, trying to dodge gantries? First of all, I think it's a fallacy. I think the avoidance issue is more or less like not coming into Rhode Island, that they take, 395 to the Pike rather than, puddle jumping all over the state trying to, miss a gantry or two. But I think part of the political sell was that, our state police will be there to make all this enforcement. And, philosophically, committing the state police to all of this, I think is, in some way, almost irresponsible as an argument that it was a good plan.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I was not privy to the gantries, nor is that part of
because you were too busy, or do you purposely not pay attention to some of, and I ask this respectfully, I mean, do you purposely not pay attention to some of these political debates until?
Well, yes, because we have a certain role, and I'm not part of the political dialogue, nor should I be. So when laws get passed, I'm sure, right now we have a legislative process where there are laws that we look at, and if we think it's good for the people, the citizens of Rhode Island, or what's good for law enforcement, or what's bad for law enforcement, we'll weigh in and we'll go to the governor's office and we'll go to legislators and say, look, this is a good idea on our part or not. And then, there's fodder back and forth, and if they pass a law, they don't. We enforce whatever comes out of the General Assembly. If we agree with it or don't agree with it, really is mute. So no, I don't try. I do my best not to become part of any political dialogue because I don't think that's our role at all.
Well, of course, your role was stretched. It just dawns on me to ask you this question. I mean, when you put the report together on the Cranston police dilemma there with Mayor Fung and all the controversy there, you were drawn into a unique investigation that had political overtones to it. At the end of the day, were you comfortable with the way that whole thing kind of panned out? Nothing much is being said about it now.
Yeah,
but that was a unique
absolutely.
experience for the state police.
It was. It's not unique in the sense we've been to 50 different departments over 50 years, believe it or not. And that particular one was an ask of the mayor to look into the police department overall operations and what happened with, as they allude to, his ticket gate. So that happened. So we ran the department for 10 months, and those same troopers were charged with doing that assessment. So they couldn't do the assessment while they're there. They did notes on it, and when they came out, that's when the assessment happened. But there were no issues there. I think it worked out well until things changed when we found out that something happened on our watch that we weren't privy to. So basically, we felt like we were backdoored, which we were, and as an organization, that's just not acceptable. You asked us to go in to do a job, and if you would think that we're going to close our eyes to what we find, if whatever we find, that's what you asked for. So maybe be careful what you ask for, but if it was good, we'd write it good. If it wasn't good,
right.
And so yeah, I think you get thrown into the political fire, but with no intent. We wrote a factual report, and that's really a summary of what happened.
Right.
And I think it's important that we've stayed out of it from the day we wrote the report. The day we put it out, we haven't made a comment on it since. It stands on its own.
All right. Hold that thought, because of course the 38 Studios thing is still lingering, and I want to ask the superintendent about that. But in the meantime, I just wanted to make a quick point about our friends at Cumberland Kitchen Bath Design Center. So this morning I'm leaving the house, but a friend comes over early in the morning who hadn't been over for about 6-8 weeks, I guess. She walks in and says, "Oh my goodness, what did you do?" The kitchen renovation kind of shocked her. When you're living through a month's worth of kitchen renovation, you kind of see it morph. When somebody visits you on a before and after basis, you get that kind of reaction, and we did. I can tell you that the budget and the timetable from Cumberland Kitchen Design Center to renovate our kitchen was on time and on budget. And let's put it this way, it's surprising some people. It was refreshing. You'll enjoy the experience with Cumberland Kitchen Bath Design Center. Contact them if you're thinking about a renovation, and they'll do a free measure, which is really a consultation. Back with the Colonel. Stay with us. All right, I want to ask this question in the proper way, since the Colonel is with us and he's looking formal, and I need to comport myself properly here. But this particular story in 38 Studios, I have kind of a Jersey term for it that I probably shouldn't use, but you want to talk about just a slow death of a process here. We've had, in my judgment, these phantom hearings at the Oversight Committee at the legislature. We've never done what I think was appropriate. In terms of the legislature vetting its own self, its behavior from back in 2010. Some of the legislators will blame you and the state police for being the entity that has pushed them away from the real investigation for the people, because you're holding all the cards and we're waiting for your shoe to drop. What's the reality about that whole dynamic? What are you doing? Is the investigation still open? And how does it intersect with the legislative committee?
No, it's a fair question. Without getting into the details, the case is still pending. And what that means, it's as close as it's ever be to coming to some type of reality with an end game, without telling you what the end game is. That will happen. Some of it is, you'd have to understand, I think you do, how investigations work, where you interview, and then those interviews lead to more interviews, which leads to subpoenas, which leads to other ways of investigating, which takes time. Some companies don't respond to subpoenas. I mean, subpoenas for records, and you have to analyze the records, and you interview. That leads in more interviews. So how it morphed into a pretty long-term investigation with the Attorney General's office. The U.S. Attorney looked at a small piece of that. We meet all the time on it. It's not something that we don't pay attention to. It's there. I won't tell you what the end game was. That wouldn't be fair, because tomorrow or the next day I'll be getting inquiries from everybody from around the country about it. But for the legislative hearings, the impact they have on us is whatever we know through our investigative process, we have to pay attention to what people say at those hearings, and we compare what they said there to what they said to us, if they said something to us. And then we also went to the depositions. When the depositions came out, it was incumbent upon us to have our detectives read every single deposition and compare those depositions of everybody that was deposed.
Well, you know, not to interrupt, we're short on time, which is why I say they should have gone full throttle with legislative hearings. I'm talking about years ago, never mind months ago, because you would have taken notes. I've never called for you to accelerate your process past your comfort zone. Law enforcement investigates at its comfort zone to get it right. Legislative hearings have a different take, and if you can cross notes and do some double checking and all that kind of thing and learn from it, fine. Did you ever tell the legislature, don't do this kind of stuff because it's getting in the way of what we're trying to do?
Several years ago when this developed, we asked them, and they did. They backed off from doing it. So for them...
Respectfully, I wish you hadn't done that.
Well, for them, whatever they do is they can do that. It doesn't impact us at all, except it slows our process down because we have to take note. If Dan Yorke's interviewed, we have to see what you said to us and what you said to them. And if it's consistent, because you may have been interviewed by the state police, by the for the depositions and by the legislative process, and two sentences may be different, which changes what you said. So that's something you have to pay attention to, you review. To me, as an investigator, a career investigator, we have squared away state troopers assigned to this that know what they're doing. We have FBI agents assigned to it that know what they're doing. We have attorneys from the U.S. Attorney's Office looking at a small piece, and we also have...
I thought the U.S. Attorney had no interest in
They had a
this.
small piece of 38 Studios in the beginning. I think the Attorney General already spoke about that one piece. I think it was the SEC piece.
And frankly, I think the Attorney General should have recused himself. He was a sitting rep during that time. You
No,
have a thought
honestly,
on that?
you and I have talked about that, and this particular case, we talked at length. I did with the Attorney General, and right from the get-go, I was very comfortable what his role, if any, was back then, and with the prosecutors that this case would go forward. So,
well, if we had a whole show, we could debate whether or not that was all that came down the right way. Far be it for me to be sitting here debating you about your perspective, but I am a tax-paying citizen, and we can agree to disagree on that. At the end of the day, is there a timetable on
everybody
this?
asked me when. So, to me, if I told you in September, October, it wouldn't be fair. But I can tell you that it's as close as being to coming to completion. There's a couple things that need to be done.
Okay.
We're in March, so I wouldn't want to promise you March, April. It's not fair. But it's certainly our #1 priority to make sure that we facilitate our investigation so people know to the best of their ability what transpired at 38 Studios.
Will it be a compelling or a heavy sigh?
I can't comment on that.
All right, the most important question I have for the evening, though, is what's the LaSalle lacrosse team look like this year?
Hopefully they'll be well. We have a good group of young men.
Do you wear the uniform when you're coaching, or you?
Never. No, I actually never wear this when I go to school. I always make sure there's a separation.
You always look the part, and we respect the part, and we appreciate the work you do. Thanks for coming.
No, thank you.
Colonel O'Donnell, always great, my friend. All right, when we come back, a final word. Stay with us. I tried. I'm trying to get something on this 38 thing. Stay with us. All righty, so on tomorrow's show, we'll talk to the harmonica player in that band, Professor Roots. It's more about his whole life at Brown University, the study of plants and the music, and it's pretty funny, and it's a Good Friday show, and you'll enjoy it. I'll see you on the radio tomorrow. We'll talk about Trump on WPRO. Bye.